On today's episode, we'll talk about figuring out what the actors need, the DP director operator relationship, 1917, aliens, and of course, having Stanley Kubrick photograph you while you work. Just a little bit of business before we start. There may be a curse word here or there in this episode, so please listen responsibly. As always, our website, theop.io, is up and chock full of tips, tricks, and gooey operator goodness. Make sure to check out the breakdown, where the best operators in the biz explain shots they have done, the musings, where we discuss everything from quick tips to larger concepts of storytelling, the answers, the images, and so much more. I may or I may not take a break or two during this episode, but I promise that none of them will be longer than 22 seconds. Finally, if you are enjoying the podcast, please follow us, write a review, share us with your parents, and talk us up around the water cooler with your friends. So grab a beverage, sit back, and enjoy the op. Thanks for listening.
Lock it up, nice and quiet, and let's roll.
Rolling. Victor 30 Echo, take 2.
Hey, Margaret. Be marked.
And camera set. And action.
Hello and welcome back to the Op Podcast, the podcast where we talk about operating and the art of visual storytelling. I'm Dave Kamaides, your host, and I am coming to you from airy London, who have been kind enough while I'm over in England to allow me to interview people in their green room because it sounds better and is less echoey than the Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. I have a really great guest today, Pete Cavaciuti, who is here with, by the way, just in case you hear them, his 2 dogs, Rocco and Whiskey Blues. Now, one of them is your son's dog.
Yeah, Whiskey Blues is my son's dog.
So you may hear them in the background. Pete is an amazing A-camera, Steadicam operator. He's done a ton of things. He has been nominated for the BSC Operator of the Year Award for Mary Queen of Scots, Roots, and Muppets Most Wanted, which makes me very happy. And he also won for the movie Allied. Some, but not all by any means, of the movies he's done. Jurassic World Dominion and Fallen Kingdom. Spider-Man Far From Home, Skyfall 1917, Aliens Eyes Wide Shut, Kundun. The list goes on and on. Pete, thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure, Dave.
This
Lovely
is great.
to meet you.
Yeah. This is there's a dog on your lap asleep. This is fantastic.
Yeah. Rocco's makes himself comfortable.
He's very chill. So tell me, how'd you get to where you are? What's your story?
Well, I guess it all started off because as a child I used to draw a lot. I was really into art, later on. But as a child I was always sketching, so I always liked looking at whatever, and ended up drawing, and that got me eventually. At school I decided I wanted to go to art college. I had a big worry about it because I came from pretty working class background, and I said to my art tutors at school, am I going to earn a living? And they said, well, probably not. So you'll have to decide.
Some sort of backup or whatever.
Are you doing this for the love or whatever? But so I wanted to be a painter. I went to art college for 3 years and studied painting and sculpture, and then at art college on a Monday night there was a film club, and it had some pretty way out art films, not narrative based films, very visual, lots of animation. And I thought, oh my God, this is really interesting.
Oh, that's cool. This is university, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So was it 3 years or?
Well, we did a foundation year where you sort of did mixed arts, pottery, painting, printmaking, and then I decided I knew I wanted to go to try and be a painter or a sculptor. So I did that for a year at Hornsey College of Art in Crouch End, and then I went to the degree course at Hornsey, which was in a building called Alexandra Palace, on a big hill in London. It used to be a broadcasting centre, and it was a Victorian leisure centre. Trains used to go up to it. Beautiful place. So I went there for 3 years, and going to the film club, I sort of had a change in direction, really, because I thought, do I want to spend the rest of my life as an artist in a room on my own? And I thought, I don't really want to do that, And I loved, filmmaking seemed like a very expressive social art form. So I decided I'd go for that. And then I left college in 1980, spent a year doing odd jobs, motorcycle messengering, working in restaurants. And then a tutor of mine, a guy called Dante Leonelli, who's just passed away the past couple of weeks ago at 93,
Oh.
um, gave me a call at home and said there was a producer called Emma Gowing who was looking for trainees for a soap opera starting up in Liverpool, because in 1982 Channel 4 started.
Hmm.
So I went up for a couple of interviews, and like Liverpool was literally on its knees then. Most of the Liverpudlians were coming to London for looking for work, because it was you know,
This is like during the Depression in the
yeah, it
80s.
was like an abandoned city really.
Yeah.
There'd been riots all over
Oh,
England.
jeez.
Anyway, I got a job in, so, succeeded in my interviews and got a job at Brookside, and I did that for 2.5 years, and it was a lightning progression, because I was a trainee for about 6 weeks,
Yeah.
and then the cameraman decided that they didn't want to operate. So we became literally, I went from trainee to operator. So it was like a film school,
And I think Vince McGann was just telling me that you cut your teeth on Brookside. I think he
Yeah,
mentioned
yeah, yeah.
that
It was
yesterday.
it was a fantastic
And
opportunity.
this is like, is this sort of like we would have like General Hospital? It's like one of these soap operas that they shoot a ton of, and it's been on for 30 years or
Yeah, I
something
mean, I
like that.
think it lasted 20 years, and then it wasn't commissioned
But he was saying
anymore.
that Steadicam was a big part of it.
It was Steadicam, and they shot it originally they thought about shooting it on film, and then they realised they couldn't get it processed and back and edited in time.
Because it's just going so
It's
fast.
going so fast. So
Yeah.
we used to shoot 2 episodes a week, and then you'd have a week off.
Wow.
So, but they shot it in a film style. It was all single camera.
Huh.
So for me, it was fantastic, because I learned, about the eye lines.
But you learned on the job.
I literally learned on the job. I would be on comms, and the cameraman would be teaching me. But
That's
I
amazing.
mean, I brought my visual ability that I'd
Yeah.
honed at art college. So I guess I had an innate understanding of how to frame things.
Right. Sure.
And I'd studied a lot. A lot
That's
of
incredible. Do
classical
you remember what your
painters.
first day was like? Was it just completely overwhelming, or?
No, I mean, we shot things pretty basically. I didn't, but you had to do your own focus, your own zooming.
Oh, wow.
We,
Okay.
we didn't have an assistant. You'd build the camera yourself. So there was just myself and the DP. But no, I can't exactly remember the first day. But
But I guess at least in the scenario you're talking about, they understood that you didn't know what you were doing. I mean, they didn't
no,
expect you to. So
no, they didn't. No, it was very forgiving. And I
Yeah.
had to know there was a cameraman called Peter Boisseau, and Ken Horn, who taught me, Tony Cavell, an older guy at the time, and they were great teachers.
Oh, that's
Tony especially
fantastic.
was, he was a veteran back then, veteran TV cameraman. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it was just an amazing break,
That's incredible.
And then after 18 months, they bought a Steadicam, and I sort of cocked my nose at it and said, "Well, what's this thing?"
Had you seen one before?
I'd never seen one
Ah,
before, no.
okay.
So
So,
a
so
guy
the production
called,
company actually bought one.
they bought it
Yeah.
because they thought they didn't want to buy a dolly, because they didn't want to employ a grip. So they got a Steadicam. So, and a guy called John Ward, who's no longer with us, a great Steadicam operator, came up to teach us for a couple of days, and then a gentleman who worked for Joe Dunton Cameras called John Jordan, who's retired now, came up to teach us. He worked for Joe Dunton, so
Huh.
we were literally thrown in at the deep end.
Wow.
But it was fantastic, because the DPs weren't into operating it. So it's myself and the other operator, Peter Fear, and I had like 2.5 years of practicing with it.
That's incredible. And
So
but
it was,
not really practice. I mean, actual
oh no,
shooting with
yeah,
it,
yeah,
learning while you were doing it.
yeah.
And this is what, like 85, 86? What
No,
was
this would have been 83.
So this is really early in
So I
Steadicam
started
stuff.
80 in
Yeah.
83, and I think there was like 4 Steadicam operators in the UK
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
And I was the youngest of them. I was in 24, 25. So
What an amazing experience.
I mean,
That's
it was
incredible.
just so fortunate.
Yeah.
Without that call from Dante, I wouldn't have got the job. And
And
Yeah.
are you operating with a cable then?
yeah, it
Yeah.
was it's like I think 25 core cable,
Yeah.
about half an inch thick,
So
maybe more.
you're already learning with a handicap, so it only is
Yeah,
going to
so
get better from
so you
there.
had to loop the cable and put it up, up the back of the vest.
Yep, yep,
You
yep.
know,
And this is like Model 3? What?
we had a Model 2 to start with.
Okay.
With the fishtail at the
Yep,
back.
yep. The battery on the back.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember that well. Yeah,
And then
yeah.
we had then we went to a 3A.
Yeah.
I sold the 2.
Wow.
You know,
So basically, you did that for how many years?
I was only at Brookside for 2.5 or 3 years.
Yeah, but that's where you cut your teeth, and so by the
That's
time
where
you
I cut
came
my
out of
teeth.
there, you were a legitimate operator. But I mean,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
kinda-
I mean, I was still very green. I mean,
sure, but
it's only 2.5, 3 years.
yeah,
And I remember when I did my first film job, the assistant asked me if I wanted to use an EPL,
what's an EPL?
eyepiece leveler,
Eyepiece.
and I,
Okay.
and I said to him, "What's an EPL?" And he
Oh,
gave
yeah,
me
just
this
said- yeah.
look and put his head in his hands.
Well, you weren't even used to having an assistant, right?
No, like like seeing a film camera, and it was a
Was that overwhelming?
a revelation,
Yeah.
But I left Brookside in 85 in I think 1985,
Mhm.
and to work on a film called Letter to Brezhnev.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people who were working at Brookside decided to leave, and they got this film together.
Oh wow,
Excuse me, dog sneezing.
yeah, that's fine. They,
That they,
they could do that.
Yeah. So a lot of Brookside people left to work on this very low budget film,
Mhm.
which ended up getting bought by Channel 4. And I met a guy who's a fellow operator now, Chris Plevin. He was the assistant, and Bruce McGowan was the DP. So
Okay.
I actually AD'd that film. The directors were my pals from Brookside, and they said, "Do you want to light it?" And I said, "No way." I said, I'll be assistant director." So it was the AD. So I had a brief flirtation with being an assistant director when I came back to London after
That's
Letter to
very funny.
Brezhnev, but I
Wow.
didn't enjoy it,
Yeah, obviously.
because what I failed to mention, I did want to direct. That was coming out of art college. I thought, oh, I'd love to direct.
Sure.
But when I got in the camera department, I just got completely,
That was it.
yeah, seduced by camera, and I've never really wanted to light. I've had I lit a few promos way back in the odd commercial,
Mhm.
but I just love operating. I can't see myself, even at my stage, ever stopping,
I think I'm kind of the same
operating.
way.
I just love the metaphysics of it all, and
Exactly.
the whole dynamic, working with actors and the crew, the camaraderie,
Yeah. Do you know Sean Bobbitt?
Yeah. I've never worked with Sean. Great work.
I've worked with Sean a bunch
Yeah.
in the United States, and I
Yeah.
tell him the same thing every time, which is one of these days I'm going to get you off of because he operates himself.
Yeah.
I'm going to get you off of the camera, and he looks at me and he goes, "It's never going to happen."
No,
and
it's
it's
like Roger Deakins. He never wanted to step away.
yeah, and it's
You know.
it's the same thing. I think I'm the same thing, which is I can't imagine sitting in a tent somewhere and watching. I just lose my mind.
No.
But I asked, I did the, I think you did as well. You did Roger Deakins' podcast actually.
Yeah.
Podcast. And I did it with him, and I actually at a certain point I asked him if I could ask him a question, and he said yeah. And I said, if you had to make a choice, would you be a camera operator or a lighting DP? And he didn't even blink. He's I'd be a camera operator.
Yeah, no, I've seen something written down on that as well.
Yeah. Which I understand anyway.
Yeah.
Other people, but I think I'm the same way. I would get very antsy, and that's the part I love. I mean, it's just fantastic.
Yeah.
So it must have been amazing to you to get out there and go, wait a minute. So someone else is going to pull focus, and I don't have a cable. I mean,
well, we still had a cable because
okay.
I started just before.
Oh, there's no transmission probably back then.
Well, we used to use a Hayden motor with a little pentometer cable attached to it
for the follow focus.
Just before the sites.
Yeah.
Radio controls came
the
here.
sites follow focus, which
was no more than, I think it was a modified amateur aeroplane radio.
The thing I remember with the
contact.
sites was, the focus puller would do a shot, and then they'd come over, and then they'd adjust everything, and then they'd do a shot again, and always there was that thing where they'd come over right at the end of the shot and goes, "I'm on 4 feet. That's on." Okay, well I know the end was in focus at least.
Yeah, there was always backlash on the lenses. You'd never quite make the marks, would you?
And I remember in the summer the lenses the motors would overheat, and they'd have like ice packs on the motor. I can't believe anything ever got done.
No, it's come on a long way. Then we'd have very often a video cable.
A video cable, sure,
because it was pre-transmitter.
And not to mention that. I look back now, and the monitors that we looked at, I don't know how we did it. I mean,
No.
how we didn't see everything bad in the world because they were, size of a credit
Well,
card, 4 feet away from us.
remember I was doing, I think it was on, I can't remember if it was Aliens, Anamorphic, probably not, but it was an Anamorphic
Oh, it's
film I
even
was
less.
doing, and it was like 3 UK postage stamps. It can't have been more than 3/4 of an inch
Yeah,
high
half of your image is
and,
nothing,
and an inch and a half wide,
uh,
and it was just like tiny.
wow,
Uh,
that's amazing.
yeah.
So did you then just start freelancing at that point?
Well, I came back to London and I literally walked around offices. I knocked on doors. It was pre-mobile phone.
Yeah,
I had a VHS cassette. I got a book. I spoke to Chris Plevin, my pal from Letter to Brezhnev, and he said, there's a book. I can't remember it. Was it The Knowledge Out then? Anyway, there was a contact book. So I just went through it and found London companies doing promos
that's
and
great.
literally knocked on the door. And I knocked on the door of one company called MGMM. Russell Grant was in it, Russell Mulcahy, Mallet. And I met a producer called, I think it was Jackie Byford that day, and showed her my Brookside
Yeah.
showreel, which was like people, Liverpudlians walking around the set of Brookside, and they literally had a Steadicam job the next day with
Amazing.
Pete Townsend brother Simon Townsend. So that would have been like 1985, and I got a 3-day pop promo.
As like a music video sort
Yeah,
of
yeah,
thing or
yeah.
whatever. Wow.
Charged them much less than what I should have charged.
Because you probably didn't even
I
know,
didn't
right?
know, no.
Because
But
I'm assuming at Brookside you were on salary essentially.
oh
right?
yeah,
Okay.
we're all on
Yeah.
salaries. Yeah, yeah.
That's great.
So yeah, that was literally my first freelance job.
Wow.
Hired a rig from Joe Dunton's in Stonebridge Park, and off I went. And then I met I think the DP was Adrian Wild, so I got a few more jobs with Adrian. Met other people.
Yeah.
Just started doing commercials.
Uh-huh.
And met on commercials. I was meeting DPs that were doing features.
Yeah.
So that really helped.
Well, and also, like you said, you were one of what, 4 or 5 people in the
Yeah, I mean, I
country?
was the youngest kid on the block,
Yeah.
really. The other
So-
guys were in their 40s, and
And I'm sure everybody was looking for Steadicam operators because it was the
yeah,
new thing.
it was
so.
a busy time then. And as
That's
it
amazing.
progressed, I used to get a lot of work in Europe,
Yeah.
on commercials.
Oh, that's great.
You
That's amazing. And so was Aliens the first sort of big feature you did? Or had you done things
Yeah,
before that?
it was the first
Or
big
was
feature.
Aliens even a big feature? I don't even
Oh
know.
no, it was
it was.
big. It was big.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I got that because through a company called Cine Focus, John Ward was doing Full Metal Jacket, and he was involved with a company called Cine Focus, and John called me up and said, "Look, I can't do Aliens. I think he'd done a few days on it. Are you up for doing it?" And of course, I jumped at the chance.
Yeah.
So that was my first big job.
Wow. So your first big job as a movie.
Yeah, that was
James.
where the EPL story came from.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
when I was doing second camera. Would you
Now,
like an EPL?
you remember Terrence Nightingale?
Sorry?
Terrence Nightingale. He was I think he was the clapper loader.
I do. Yeah.
Terrence is a good friend of mine.
Oh,
actually.
really?
Yeah. He would when I started ER. Terrence was the focus puller.
Okay.
And honestly, I was 25. I didn't know what I was doing, and
Yeah.
he's the reason that I succeeded mostly because
yeah.
he sort of guided me through that. And then he took over when I left, and he operated for years,
Yeah.
and he actually just retired.
Oh well.
Yeah.
Was Martin Hume was the focus puller? I
Martin
remember.
Hume. Yeah. Oh, I tried to get in
Fantastic
touch with
focus
her, but-
puller
yeah.
who's retired now. He ended up operating on Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing operator, amazing
Yeah.
focus player. So, I mean, your first big feature is James Cameron. That's
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't all. I think I did about 6 weeks
Just come and go.
of dailies. Yeah.
yeah.
But it was pretty incredible, and I got on really well with James.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good experience.
Now,
you
out
know.
of curiosity, did you teach the actors how to stand with the Steadicam when they had the guns on there or whatever?
No, that was John. John was doing that.
Oh,
I
he
think
was-
it was the character was Vasquez. I think.
Vasquez,
The
yeah.
the
Who's
female,
must
yeah.
have been no more
Yeah.
than 5 feet tall.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, they were fascinated by it, and every
Yeah.
time I put it on, they'd come over and ask how it works.
so great.
And they were really cool. Those
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah, and I mean, did they do well with it on, or did they have it on and go, "I got to get this off"? Or
No, they were. I mean, Vasquez was a strong lady.
it's amazing.
Yeah, and she was great. And I always remember that Sigourney Weaver was just it really taught me about actors and marks because, we do a rehearsal and we put a mark down, and then Sigourney would go away, get prepped, and then before we rolled, she'd be doing her lines
Yeah.
and like walking up to the mark, looking down, and she just got
To figure out how to time it
she
out
got
or
she
something.
got the physicality of it all sorted out, and when it came to the take, she was bang
She
on
was
because
there.
she understood it was so
Yeah.
so low light,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
shallow depth of field, and
Uh-huh.
but she really got it.
Oh, that's
Sigourney Weaver.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I wish everybody was like that now.
No, no, it's a bit more
Well, we were just
organic
I
now,
was
isn't
just
it?
talking about it with Ozzy last night actually.
Mm.
And we were talking about how one of the things is it used to be that you had to hit your mark because if you didn't, you
You
weren't
wouldn't be
going to be
seen.
seen. I mean,
No.
and now everybody likes spaces, and so
Yeah.
it's sort of like it's
Yeah.
understandable that actors are, well,
It's
I'll get
different. Yeah.
somewhere over there.
It's
I don't know
different.
whether it's better or it's worse. I mean, I'm sure a little bit of both.
Yeah.
But that's an amazing movie to be a part of,
Yeah.
though. As your first
Oh no,
film.
it was incredible. The sets, and they had those amazing like converted plane, the things that used to pull the planes along, ATV.
Oh yeah, to as one of the moon rover or
Oh,
whatever
it's
planet.
incredible. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and the sets were just unreal.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And Terrence was telling me that they would just smoke those sets up like
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, and we shot in Acton Power Station, a disused power
Yeah,
station.
he mentioned that.
Yeah.
But I mean,
That was
visually, that must
freezing.
have been incredible. Oh, was it? Was it?
Oh, it
was
was
in the
really
winter.
cold. It was freezing. Yeah, middle of the winter.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, it was an amazing project.
And was
The
it a
first
completely
project.
different experience for you than Brookside?
Well, yeah, much more disciplined. I
Yeah.
mean, things took a lot longer.
Was there a
To
learning
move.
curve for you as far as like just figuring out, okay, I'm working with a dolly grip, I'm working with a
Oh yeah,
a
massive
focus
because
puller.
I hadn't really worked with dolly grips. I mean, or had a proper assistant or seen a 35 mm film
Yeah.
camera. So I
Okay.
mean, I
Yeah.
did like some prep at Joe Dunton's, put balance the camera and everything.
What are you shooting with a BL or
No, it was a Panavision camera.
it's like a Panavision
It was
lightweight or something? Or?
yeah, it was
Yeah.
the camera that used to be on the what was the
Oh, the Panaglide?
the Panaglide,
Yeah,
yeah,
it was
which
basically a
which I
lightweight
used
thing.
once on a film.
I used
The
once as well, the Panaglide, and it had
Yeah.
the monitor was on that little pin that if you went too fast, it would start to vibrate.
I know.
I think it was terrible.
Well, I did a film called Testimony, a black and white film with about Shostakovich,
Oh.
which was a fantastic film, and we had the Panaglide on that. That was I think that was the first full feature I worked on. That would have been 85, end of 85, with a cameraman called Nick Nolan in it, and it kept breaking down all the time, the Panaglide. So I'd have to take the bottom off, and it had lots of circuit boards
I remember that.
that were sat in a tray at the
Yep.
bottom. So I just pulled the circuit boards out and
Put
put
'em
them
back
back
in.
in, and bend the pins a bit, and then it'd work. And they thought I was a genius, but I mean, I knew nothing. Just pulled the battery out,
I started out with
but I
a.
really liked it as a rig.
Oh, you did?
I thought it
drove
really
me nuts.
I thought it
Oh,
really balanced quite well.
wow, it
You know.
drove me nuts.
Yeah.
But maybe I got a bad one. I don't
Oh, who
remember.
knows? Yeah.
I don't even know why I used that on one. But I started out with a Model 1,
Yeah.
and I remember I've told this story to newer Steadicam operators. It was like, there were those two switches, and you turned one switch on to heat it up, and then the other switch turned them on. And you turn the first switch on, and nothing would happen. That was normal. And then that second switch you'd turn on and sort of hope that your
Like an
monitor
old
would-
radio
and if it didn't,
warming
you
up.
start to smack the side. And we must have looked like complete fools back then.
Oh,
But
I
it's
know.
what you did. And I mean, I remember you'd show up on set and plug in the soldering iron just so it was hot
Oh,
in
I know.
case. I don't know.
And
how
the
we
trouble
got-
of the kits back then, they weren't modular. So if something went wrong, you'd have to get a new sled. Or I remember once,
Oh
like,
yeah.
gaffer taping a huge, monitor onto the Steadicam and having to work with it unbalanced.
Oh yeah. My version of that was
Now
I
it's-
flew to Atlanta to do a music video,
Yeah.
and something happened to the tube. There was a tube in the back of the thing, and something happened to it. And I got there, and my monitor wouldn't turn on. So I did the whole music video. Thankfully, it was a music video, so it didn't
Yeah.
make it, as long as you kept him in.
Yeah.
But there was a guy who walked next to me with a 13-inch television that I was transmitting to, and I would watch that.
Unreal, isn't it?
But it was all the stuff that we did, right?
Yeah.
But do you remember? You remember it? So you go on to Aliens, and you're working with, like you said, Martin Hume. You're working
Yeah.
with very talented people,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And you clearly don't really understand how a set works. I mean,
No.
uh, I ask because, for newer people who are starting out, do you just cop to it? Do you just say, "Look, I'm new. Can you help me?" Or do you try to sort of fake your way through it?
Well, I
Or
think, I mean, they're pretty astute, the people we work with. They
you're not
worked
going to
out
get it
that,
past them?
no,
Yeah.
but I mean, they knew I could frame and operate, so they
Yeah.
were very
At
supportive.
least
But,
also you were doing Steadicam at a time when nobody was, so it's like, well,
no, I
he's doing
mean,
something we don't know, so you have some expertise
yeah, I
with
mean, it was a specialization that helped open a lot of doors.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
which people should still have, I think,
yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I didn't really bluff it. I was just pretty straight with people, and I ended up working quite a bit with Chris Plevin while he was still focusing. So he was very supportive,
uh-huh.
and
And did
he
you
knew I
operate
was very.
conventional camera at all there, or was it just Steadicam?
I did. I ended up doing, B camera on a lot of jobs like Rob Roy. I did B camera. So the Steadicam was the door
Yeah,
that, you know, got me into the business, and I was working with people like Mike Roberts, fantastic operators who I could observe, see how they did things. So, I mean, without Steadicam, I definitely would not
yeah, that
have,
got you in the door.
and there was so much suspicion about it. Then we talked about that before you started rolling.
Yeah,
People, didn't exactly know what it could do.
yep.
Perhaps it did some shots it shouldn't do, and
Well, there's also a little bit of the old timers we're talking about,
yeah,
sort of here's this young person who
yeah,
might take my job, and so they
exactly,
weren't really going, hey, let me show you how to do everything.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
was always watching from the other side of the room trying to figure things
I know
out.
it was political sometimes. I remember one very established operator sort of wagged his finger at me one day and said, "Oh, you're one of those steady guys, aren't
Oh
you?"
boy.
So you know, you didn't have always have
Yeah.
the most welcoming
So when you were on B camera
situation.
and you're not doing anything, are you
Yeah.
basically just standing and watching what's
Oh
going
yeah, I
on, trying
watched a
to?
lot, and if there was a geared head hanging around, I'd be straight on that.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I knew after like 2 or 3 years back in London, I thought, right, do I want to stay being a Steadicam operator for the rest of my career? And I thought to myself, no, I don't.
Yeah.
I want to be an A camera operator because it's my philosophy that a camera operator should be able to operate any camera platform,
Yeah.
whether it's a remote head on a crane.
They're just tools.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes people can become a bit obsessed by a piece of equipment, and
Mhm.
it's not the way to go. You've got to use the right piece of equipment for the shot,
Yeah.
whatever the shot demands. I mean, it might be multiple tools,
Yeah.
camera platforms to get a shot done, but I think for youngsters, learn the wheels, learn Steadicam, learn how to operate gimbals, learn the functions on the camera,
Yeah.
because sometimes you'll be in a situation where you haven't got an assistant for a reason. They're off getting something, and you might need to turn over.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, there's a friend of mine who says it's not the equipment that tells the story; it's the operator.
no,
And I just thought
absolutely,
that was great.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
I think you're right. And there's a flip side to that. It's understand how to use all those things and what they do, but also understand more importantly maybe what they don't do.
No, exactly.
Because there are all those times that you get pushed into doing, and I don't know if you. Well, it's a little different here, from what I understand. Is you guys get to go on scouts a lot,
We do,
and
not all the time, but it's
you're
yeah. I
so
mean,
lucky,
that comes with I think the tradition of the operator working with the director in the UK,
right?
which I think is a
It's phenomenal.
great tradition,
Yeah.
and it does. I've just finished a film called Greenland 2, and the director Rick Roman War just loves camera operating. I mean,
Hmm.
he doesn't want to operate. He does operate sometimes, not on the last film, but he really's got a love of what a camera operator does. He understands, and that I mean, for me, that's the pinnacle. If you
It's
can,
fantastic. Yeah.
have that
Yeah.
relationship with the director, and he relies on your eye and your interpretation, what
Yeah.
moves you put in. That whole film was like handheld and about 10% Steadicam,
Uh-huh.
so it was great for me. I mean, I love doing handheld. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
Well, the thing that I was going to say was I'm jealous that you guys get to go on scouts when you do, because we almost never do.
Doesn't happen all the time, but it's
And
essential.
it's essential. Well, because sometimes I'll show up and best of intentions, the key grip and the director of photography will have decided how a shot should be done, and we'll need this specific equipment. And I show up and they hand, okay, here's the thing, and I'm thinking there's such a better way to do this. Or if I
Yeah.
had just been involved, I could have suggested this, and by then, it's like the train has already left the station. So
Yeah,
you go,
it's
okay, I
such a
can make
pity.
this
Yeah.
work, but
I mean, as an operator with like 25, 30, 40 years experience,
Yeah.
I've seen so much on a set now. I mean, I still get nervous. Every day I get nervous.
this was a question I was going to have for you, but we'll talk about that.
I've got an intuitive knowledge of which camera platform I should use, or
Yeah.
how we're going to shoot a scene, and the DP has got so much on his plate.
That's
lighting department,
yeah.
makeup department, grips. No offense to any DPs, but I bring a wealth of knowledge to
Yeah.
to
Well,
help
I
the
think it's
project.
also you're hyper focused on one area of
Exactly.
it, and they're thinking about 12 areas of it,
Exactly.
which you're
Yeah.
never going to
Exactly.
have the same. So you do get nervous?
Oh yeah, I still get nervous. Yeah, every day I get nervous.
Is
Every
it-
shot,
Is it the same nervous as it used to be, or is it a different? Like when you first started out, of course there was I don't know what I'm doing, but
No, I mean, I did a couple of days on the latest Jurassic film last week, and we were shooting long lenses on remote heads, and with guys coming down a river, and it was tricky to follow.
yeah,
Yeah. When you're on a 400 mil, so
yeah. I know
you
exactly.
blink and they duck underwater. Now where are they going?
Well, and you
You keep panning and you hope they bob back
they
up
pop
into your
up at the
frame.
right place.
So
Yeah, yeah.
those kinds of things make
Well, and
me
I think I
nervous.
don't know if you're this way, but my thing with something like that is I'm always doing it, and I'm going. I just hope everybody else realizes how hard this is.
Yeah.
Because if
it
everybody
is.
else realizes it, I'm okay, and if they don't, then I'm in trouble.
No,
But I did.
Yeah.
Do you know Bill Pope? You ever work with
I've
Bill
worked.
Pope?
What a great guy.
He's amazing, and I just actually did a bunch of commercials with him. But I did. I don't know, Thor 4 reshoots with him or something, and we had some shot.
Have you interviewed Bill?
I just did actually on the commercial. We
Did
were
he
in
tell you
Chicago together.
Did he mention the Clint story?
The Clinton story? No.
The Clint Eastwood story.
Oh, Clint Eastwood. No.
Oh, there's a great story. I'm not going to recount it here about a trainee not getting their per diems.
I'm going to ask him
You've got
about
to.
that. Okay.
It's just the best story.
Okay.
And it makes you love Clint Eastwood.
I will.
But I won't tread on his story.
No,
but
that's fine. I'll ask him about that. I actually did interview Clint's operator. Why can't I think of his name right now? He's operating
Italian name.
He's operating Campanelli, Steve Campanelli. He's
Yeah, I met
operating for him
Steve
for
as
like
well.
25 years
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah.
And he I mean, yeah.
Well,
Anybody who's listening to this, go listen to Steve Campanelli's episode, because it's just the Clint stories are fantastic.
Well, he's a tough guy. I mean, lovely person, I
Yeah.
understand, but you get one or two takes and you move on.
Yeah.
So you've got to be on the
No, you
on your
absolutely
game.
have to be on
it's
your game.
really
There's no
tough.
question. But I was doing the thing with Bill Pope, and I was on a long lens, and it was ironically it was someone in water. Can't think of his a big actor. I can't think of his name, but he was sort of like walking forward, and then he would drop and come up, and Bill just came over to me on the second take, and he goes, "You gonna keep him in the whole time at some point?" And I just looked at him and I said, "You know what's going on?" He said, "No, I understand. I was just wondering if you felt like maybe And of course I'm doing it, and he knew what was going on. He was just busting me, but he's a wonderful guy. He's actually
That's him all over.
the other thing that's really great about him that I really appreciate is he just absolutely loves film. And he
absolutely.
loves films, I should say. And I mean, he goes to a movie in the movie theater every week.
Wow.
Or tries to. And actually, while we were in Chicago, because we had a couple days off, we went to this place called the Music Box Theater that shows 70 millimeter prints.
Wow.
And they had a new print of The Searchers, John Ford's The Searchers. So we
incredible.
went to go see that, which was great. It was.
I saw a 70 mil print of 2001.
Oh my
a
gosh.
couple of months back.
Amazing.
I must have seen that film more tthan any other film
Is that right?
in my whole life.
It was a seminal movie.
I just love that.
Do you understand it yet?
It's just the lack of dialogue.
It's
incredible.
Yeah. Well, I was telling you before, I just yesterday sat with Kelvin Pike, who was the operator on that.
Yeah.
And I said to him, when you read the script, did you understand the script? Because I can't completely, I'm not sure I understand the movie. And he said, well, they were it was the form of it there. And I guess Kubrick was almost, figuring it out as he was doing it.
Yeah.
And,
well, he probably didn't know what it meant in the
I
end.
don't know that it sounded sort of like maybe he
When I did Eyes Wide Shut, he'd often say to me, well, we'll do this, whatever it was. We'll get the actor to do this. He said, whatever I do, people will talk about it and they'll interpret it in the way they see. And he
That's
said
fascinating.
he used to play with that a bit, I think.
Like he understood that he'd become sort of bigger
Yeah,
than whatever. Oh,
yeah.
that's interesting. What was he like to work with?
He was great. I mean, I think my first day we were shooting on the back lot at Pinewood. It was the New York street set, and my knees were knocking because you couldn't get a really
It's Stanley
at the time
Kubrick.
a higher bar of a director to work with,
No,
and
right?
Stanley was in this like white van, a Luton van with like a tail lift 'cause it was freezing cold. Um,
So he would direct from the
yeah,
van.
with
Like,
a
yeah.
on a loud
Yeah,
hailer,
yeah. Uh-huh.
and do the first take, and it was like, Peter, you're not level. It's just about. So I
And out
thought,
loud too. So
yes,
it's
Tom Cruise standing there.
Oh my gosh.
And
That's great.
I said, look, I was like, oh my god,
Yeah.
balanced the rig again, just double checked,
Mhm.
and then second take, Peter, you're still not level.
Oh my
So I
gosh.
thought this is going to be my first and
And
last
last,
day,
yeah.
but he was just winding me up.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Well,
I
Kel,
looked at the dailies the next day, and
it was fine.
it was level, but he would he'd always look out for a bullshitter.
Kelvin told me yesterday that
If you
everybody took a turn. Like
Yeah,
everybody had a day.
if you bullshitted him,
That was it.
yeah, and I was just never that kind of person. I just
So you
said,
think he
oh,
was testing you?
I think he was testing me a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I did double check
Yeah, yeah,
my
sure.
bubble
Yeah.
at the end of the evening, and it was like a tenth of a degree or slightly out. So I might have been slightly off
But the
level,
other thing
but
that I understand is, so I read something and I asked Kelvin about this, and he said it was correct. Apparently, George C. Scott was a big on
yeah,
Strangelove. George C. Scott was a huge movie star,
yeah.
and
Oh, I
and
know, yeah.
and
Well,
had
another
kind,
one of my favorite
oh
films.
yeah, oh
Yeah,
unbelievable,
yeah,
and had kind of a I mean had a reputation and this and that
yeah.
and the other. And apparently Kubrick found out that he liked to play chess, and so he
Ah,
brought a chess set, and they would play all the time, and Kubrick would beat him
I bet. Yeah,
quite often, and it
yeah,
was his way of sort of like pulling him back down or whatever. But from talking to Kelvin and the little that I've talked to, and I ask you this, but
yeah.
maybe this is what it was. It seems like he was very much into the psychology of dealing with people, and so maybe it was the kind of thing where I'm just going to push him and see what happens, and
He
to find out
definitely did. I mean,
who someone is.
his chauffeur was a guy called Emilio, and Emilio wrote a book, and I think there was some reference to that night in that. And Emilio said that Stanley, because I didn't bite and I just got on with it, he knew I wasn't.
I was okay.
That
Like,
was okay. I
yeah,
mean, I can't remember the exact words, but
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but
it's in a page in
it
that book.
sounds to me like there's a lot of that.
But I felt I got really close to him.
Yeah,
I just he was a really engaging man, and you could chat to him anytime. I mean, I think Stanley had a pretty tough reputation. He could
yeah,
fire people instantly.
yeah.
Back in his youth, but for me as an ex-art student who was brought up watching his films, it was just, I mean, it was just a dream
I can't even imagine.
for
Yeah,
me
yeah,
to work with him. I remember we were filming up at Mentmore Towers, like I think it's the was a next house the Beatles owned just outside London,
Oh,
and
wow.
we were on a night shoot, and it was a supper break, and I just wandered into this room, and like I've told this story a few times, but Stanley was sitting in the room on his own, and he looked up and said, "Oh, sorry, Stanley, I don't want to disturb you." And I went to walk out, and he said, "No, Pete, come in and have a chat." And like for 45 minutes, I just sat on a camera. I brought a camera box over and sat next to him, and I just like asked him all the questions I wanted about
Wow.
2001 and Doctor
And he
Strangelove.
was open.
And he was just a cool
What
guy.
an incredible, but
You know,
I think it's especially when he gets to Eyes Wide Shut, right?
yeah,
I think everybody probably has an idea of who he is, which may
yeah,
be right and may be
yeah,
wrong, and it's probably hard to just be a normal person. So, like, sometimes to just sit and talk to someone
yeah,
one on one is probably a
yeah.
treat for someone like that.
It was just a joy. And at like the end of the film, I think Martin Hume was operating, and he left to work on something else. So I did a few days pickups on my own, and we were on a remote headshot pushing into the gate of the mansion that Tom ends up going into a day shot, and
Hmm.
I just had Stanley sitting beside me, like taking photographs of me operating and like chatting away to me, and I just, it was just,
What a treat. What a gift.
he was just
That's amazing.
a great mind,
It was he an open collaborator? I mean, he clearly knows what he wants, but was he also,
Oh
if
no,
you had an idea or
yeah, I remember my first time I thought, oh my God, am I going to suggest something?
well, that's what I was
And I
thinking.
was
Is like,
like
who am I to
really nervous,
yeah.
and we were doing like one of the interior orgy scenes, and we just needed to be in a slightly, I think, I suggested to Stanley we start a bit wider, then move in to sort of shot changed,
Hmm.
because we had a revolve, nothing was really changing in the shot, perspective wise. And so I thought, well, I'll suggest it to him, and he went, really good idea. So, I sort of crossed that bridge with him,
And then
and
suddenly you have a little more
he
confidence.
would listen to you,
Yeah.
if you had an idea. And
This may seem like an odd question, but when
uh,
you're working with someone like that, is it hard when they come up with an idea to not say, well, I have another idea, but I mean, he's Stanley Kubrick. Why am I going to give my idea? Or are you able to go, well, it's collaborative, and if
no, I mean, I think it's the operator's responsibility to come up with ideas.
sure, I'm just wondering when you're working with
And
someone like that, if it's
no, I
all
mean, not
yeah,
in the end. I mean, first few
yeah,
days, maybe, but no, I don't. No, I don't find that a challenge now. I mean, I don't get precious about my ideas. I mean, I did when I started in my career.
yeah.
If the director didn't want to do something, I'd go, like, oh God, we're making
They're
the
not
wrong.
listening, and
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
but I quickly learned, that it's not, I'm making it's a collaborative effort, but the director,
yeah.
it's his vision, and I've got to, uh, adapt my thoughts to, so his vision is realized. And if he or she doesn't want to do something, just
So be
move
it.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Your job is
yeah,
to throw the ideas
yeah,
out there,
yeah,
and if they don't,
yeah.
have you had those situations where you've thought that something should be shot one way, and they went, no, we're shooting it this way, and you're thinking this doesn't work at all, and then when you see it, you go, oh, you know what? I understand what they were going for, and that
Yeah,
was the
I've
right
thought
way
that
to do it.
quite a few times, and yeah, I mean, there's so many ways as to shoot a scene. What
Absolutely.
is the right way?
And well, then there probably is no right way.
You
There's just
know,
different ways,
I mean,
right?
I think one thing I always try and remember is to try and keep things looser. I think there's a can be an obsession with close-ups,
Hmm.
and I think things are more,
You mean
cinematic.
looser as far as a frame size, you're saying?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
if
yeah,
you're
yeah.
shooting with like an actor, maybe a cowboy shot rather
Mhm.
than a mid shot, and
Yeah.
that's something I try and do. I mean, I did a film with Stephen Goldblatt a few years back. I can't remember the bloody title. The Red, White, and Royal Blue.
Okay.
And I made a point of trying to keep things looser because it was a film about, the royal family. And I thought, well, we really need to see their environment they're in.
Okay.
And so, I mean, and so I definitely shot things looser than I
Is
do
that something
normally.
you discussed, or you just would
No, I
sort of
just did
plant
it.
the camera
I
there
just did
and
it, and Stephen liked it, and the
yeah.
director
Uh-huh.
liked it,
Uh-huh.
and I think it really worked.
Yeah.
Because that's something that Stanley, working with Stanley taught me. I talked to him sometimes about headroom, and Stanley always liked a lot of headroom, and
Yeah.
so I thought, why? And so one day I asked him. He said, well, it diminishes the actor. You become aware of the environment.
They're in the
So you've
environment as
got a
opposed to
small,
yeah.
and I read a bit about his philosophy of directing, and he said, well, you're seeing a person who's affected by their environment, a
Hmm.
smaller person, and it's the environment is oppressing them or affecting their behavior. And so I'd end up with like the the descent across on somebody's shoulder
Hmm.
a lot of times, no matter what the lens was, and it would give me more headroom than I'd normally use.
Yeah. But that's great because I mean it's psychological framing.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
there's a great British film called Control about a band called Joy Division that
oh yeah, sure.
Anton Corbin, the photographer, directed. He
Oh
was
yeah,
there.
he's also the guy who did the U2 book, right? He did a
Yeah,
big book about U2 or
yeah,
something.
but
Yeah.
he was their photographer, and I mean, it's beautifully shot film.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, Martin Rue was the DP, but there's a lot of unconventional framing in it.
Oh, that's
A
great.
lot of headroom. There might be a light on a wall, and it frames for the lights, but it really affects,
Yeah.
you know, the characterization of the actors, because you see the environment there,
Sure.
and then something's not quite right.
That's great.
So it reflects the struggles that the
The dogs have woken up.
that the
That's
character
fantastic.
had.
Yeah.
Ian Curtis
That's
was the
great.
singer of Joy Division.
What were you on the whole movie? Because
No, I wasn't on that.
I'm sorry, on Eyes Wide Shut.
No, I took over after
Didn't Liz Ziegler
Liz Ziegler did
yeah.
10 months.
Yeah.
10 months, and
that was enough.
I think she wanted to go home.
Yeah.
So
That's a long
I
time.
came in supposedly for 3 weeks, so I had to cut short a family holiday, and then I was there for 8 months.
So it was a year and a half essentially. That's
And I did get asked to do it, but I was doing Kundun, the Scorsese film.
Oh yeah.
But my availability was asked.
Sure. How was working with Scorsese?
That was pretty amazing. Another idol. I mean,
So wait, you went from Kundun to Eyes Wide Shut?
I went from Kundun, then we did a film called Lost in Space. Where the dogs are scratching, and then
okay.
And then I got a call, as Lost in Space was in the last week. I got a call about Eyes Wide Shut, and one Friday night I went for an interview. I was in Shepperton, and I drove to Pinewood to have an interview with Stanley.
Mm-hmm.
Covered in, we've been on a set that was like covered in dust from vermiculite they were using, so there was all this crap in my hair, and turned up in shorts all scruffy to an interview with Stanley Kubrick, and they kept calling me saying, when are you coming, because Stanley's got a family.
Oh boy.
And I was just like racing in my car to get there, and
wow,
had a successsul interview.
That's a pretty impressive run. That's amazing. Wow.
But Scorsese was the reason I when I was at college I watched Mean Streets, and that was the film that
turned you on.
Really, there was not Steadicam, but I think they had this harness that did this 360 shot where Robert De Niro's drunk in the club or something, and he falls over, and I thought, I want to do this.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, so that was.
Did you tell Scorsese that?
I did. Yeah, I had a chat with him one day when we were in one of the corridors. And
was he accessible?
Oh, he was. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And it was at the crew showing. I was sitting behind Annie Lennox of all people, and got chatting to her, and Marty saw me and came up and gave me a big hug, and
oh, that's great.
Yeah, he was great. Yeah.
What a cool experience. I mean, but getting to work with your heroes. I mean,
and then Bill Friedkin, I ended up working with him like in 2001.
What was that on?
That was on a film called Rules of Engagement in Morocco.
Yeah.
That was, a French Connection,
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. Well, that's one of the great things, is being able to sit down with these people and actually ask them about these movies
Bill
that
was
you grew
great.
up on.
Bill wasn't a shy man.
Yeah.
I was so sad when he passed. I think it was this year, wasn't it? He passed away.
It wasn't too long ago.
Yeah.
1917.
Yeah. That was an amazing experience.
Had you worked with Deakins before?
Yeah, well, I met Roger on a promo in 1985, Eric Clapton promo called Forever Man.
Okay.
There was 2 Steadicam operators on it, and everybody was in shot, multiple cranes, Titan cranes, Luma cranes, and everybody was going around the what was the name of the actor? Eric Clapton.
Oh yeah.
Eric Clapton. Yes, everybody was like, Eric Clapton was on a central stage, a circular stage, and we'd all be filming each other.
Yeah.
So that's where Roger lit that.
Okay.
So I met him on that, and then Roger, a couple of months later, he was working on The Secret Garden that Agnieszka Holland directed. So he asked me to do the Steadicam on that. I was on that for about 2 months off and on, not there every day. So that's where I met Roger.
Yeah.
And then the next job up with Roger was Kundun. Yeah.
Oh, he did Kundun. Okay.
He did. Gotcha. Yeah, Roger did Kundun. Yeah.
So when you heard about the idea for 1917, I mean, did you read the script and see? Did it read like it was
read the
one
script?
shot?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was the intention from day one.
Yeah.
So we did. I mean, I was so fortunate on that because we had lots of prep. I mean, 6 months before we started, we were here at Ari, and Roger told me about the concept. There was going to be lots of stuff with the actors running at the Steadicam or whatever
Yeah.
system we had. So we'd be pointing backwards. So I thought, that's the one thing that Steadicam
Everybody thinks it does it, and it doesn't.
cannot
It just
do well
does not
because
do well.
you cannot look at the monitor.
No.
Judges just
Especially if you want the actors to run like they ran in that movie, because when you do running, it's like, okay, you just got to pull it back a little bit. But they do that full
and
out.
then and on a film called Now You See Me, myself and the other operator, Peter Robertson, we had this device called the Stable Eye, which is like a
I
Ronin.
wanted to ask you about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so we put that on a Steadicam rig then and tested it and gave it to somebody who'd never put a Steadicam on before, and the shot was beautifully steady.
Wow. I've heard unbelievable things about this.
Yeah, it's the best of the gimbal heads.
As a matter of fact, this afternoon they're bringing it to Aeroflex so I can see it. And everybody, Andy Harris, when he came back from 1917, I was talking to him. I was working on Macbeth with him, and he goes, "This stable eye." And I'm thinking, what is it? I want to see this.
Great guys, Dave Freeth and Paul LeGould.
Yeah, Paul's coming over with it today.
It is the best device.
Unbelievable.
I mean, you use the wheels to operate it.
So basically, you're saying you put it on a Steadicam, and
because we had so many shots where the actor would be behind us and running forward, and I thought, well, how are we going to do this? Because it wouldn't just be a single shot.
And it's also not on like a nice paved roadway.
No,
it's on
they might be in front of you at 1 minute, then you stop and pan them round, and then you end up chasing them.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, we've got to experiment with the Stable Eye. So we got the guys here at Ari, and we put the Stable Eye on the camera, and it worked.
Yeah.
They had to, up the transmission distance because sometimes we were like half a mile away.
Oh my God.
From the operating station.
So the Stable Eye's on the Steadicam, and then Roger is panning and tilting.
Roger's panning and tilting.
Yeah, so you're just moving it through space.
So
basically.
I'm moving it through space. So there's like one scene where George Mackay comes out the river and he's following the troops down, and we did this like 360 around an actor who's giving the orders to the soldiers for the jump over from the trenches to attack, and he's interrupting the guy saying, look, I need to see Colonel Mackenzie. So we did a 360, and then I peeled off away, and then the actor was running down the trench towards me. Then I got to the end of the trench, and I had Roger panned behind the actor, and I chased him down. Then I went in front of him again and ran down. I mean, it was still 95 pounds.
Yeah, 95 pounds.
95 pounds. I mean, I had like the post on the Steadicam.
Oh, it must have been down by your knees.
Yeah. So
that's incredible.
It was still very heavy, but I mean, it just really worked. I mean, I'd have to have the camera, the Stable Eye pushed right back over my shoulder.
So you didn't see yourself, right?
Yeah, which I did like early on, when we were practicing. I got in trouble with that a bit, but
that's amazing.
But it was so narrow. I mean, some of the trenches were so narrow. There were literally, it was like one was only 18 inches wide. It was in a V, and I had like a 9 inches to run in at the bottom, and there'd be like actors like literally holding the walls, and I'd squeeze between them, and then they'd jump down.
And they jump in.
Walk past me.
So because Andy told me that you guys would show up and Roger would look and go, it's too sunny or it's too that, and you wouldn't shoot, and then you just rehearse all day.
Yeah.
And so you had tremendous amount of rehearsal for each shot.
We'd rehearse and then we had, Charlie Rizek using the
Trinity.
The Trinity, which is an amazing device. Yeah. Not a device to run with because it's just too bulky. But I mean, the height changes.
Now you can't do that on a Stable Eye on the Steadicam?
You could, but the software wasn't ready. Dave intimated that he might be able to sort that out, but I haven't spoke to Dave for a few months now, and I don't know if that's.
Well, I'll ask him today.
That's the case.
Yeah, that's amazing. What was the hardest shot you did on there? You think, or were they all on their own?
The hardest shot for me would be the one I've just described, really, because that was about 300 yards of running, and I think we did 14 takes, something like that.
And is that basically, that would be the entire day? That's the only shot you did?
I think we might have got 2 shots that day. Sometimes we just get a shot a day. Sometimes we get 2 shots a day.
Yeah.
But I mean, before that, I think Roger asked me to do it a year before it started. So I literally started training.
I
And I'm a
can.
keen runner anyway,
Mhm.
but I just started putting extra training in,
That's
and
incredible.
that because I had to, because I just knew
Yeah. What an
what
amazing accomplishment.
was
I
coming my
went to see
way.
that movie, and I remember going to see that movie and going, well, clearly I'm not going to enjoy this movie because I'm going to be watching how it was made. And I remember at the beginning they sort of like walk up or down a ramp, and they go up the ladder into, and by the time they got up the ladder into the wasteland, I guess I
Yeah,
don't know what
yeah,
you call it.
yeah.
I
No
I I,
man's land.
I
Yeah,
was in the movie,
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
think I thought about it again
yeah,
until, I will say, the only point that bothered me a little bit was
yeah,
I fully bought the movie. I was into
yeah.
it. And then at the end, when he finally, meets up with everybody, uh,
His friend's brother who gives him,
well,
who he
Benedict
tells.
Cumberbatch came in,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and I went, "Oh, it's Benedict Cumberbatch," and
yeah.
and I remember thinking, like, why did it have to be someone I knew? Because I was
Uh,
so into
well,
it. But
that was the only 100% straight Steadicam shot
is that
on
right?
the film. Yeah,
Wow.
which I love. I love that shot.
Oh, it's
I mean,
beautiful.
I mean, it's just a fact. It was
You mean 100% meaning not the stable eye,
not the
just
stable
steady?
eye.
Yeah, yeah,
It was just,
yeah.
I had to like come in, whip round a corner,
Yep,
come onto
yep,
a, a static frame, and then start pushing in. So it
yeah,
was really tricky, and it always amazes me, how you have an intuitive knowledge of like when to move, and you know, and timing,
yeah.
you know,
But that's so much of
and
operating, right? I mean,
well, you
that's,
just get that's something that after years, I think it's just,
you can't teach it.
you just listen to the dialogue and you know
Yeah.
what speed to do it at, when to peel off, and
Yep. I
you
was
know.
talking to, I did an interview with Danny Bishop,
Oh, Danny, yeah, great
and
operator.
an amazing operator. I'd
Yeah,
never even heard of him or met him
yeah.
until we met at the
All
SOC
Quiet on the Western
Awards
Front.
and
Yeah,
All Quiet on the Western Front. But
yeah,
I was talking to him about All Quiet,
yeah,
and we're going, and then all of a sudden it hit me, and I said, "Wait a minute, Danny, do you speak German?" And he said, "No, I don't speak German." And I said,
no,
"How did you?
yeah,
I don't understand it." And he
yeah,
said, "Well, I had a script in English, so I understood what was being." He said,
yeah,
"But I just listened to the cadence and watched
yeah,
them," and I
yeah,
thought that's
yeah,
true opera. I mean,
yeah,
that's really just
yeah. And I
it's
think
being in the moment.
Danny used the stable eye a lot on
He
that,
used the
didn't
stable eye a
he? Like,
tremendous
he
amount on
called me
that.
up because
Yeah,
it's so close to 1917 in
yeah, no,
subject
absolutely.
matter. And I said to him, "You've got to have
Yeah,
the
it's
stable
incredible.
eye."
The other thing I remember from seeing the behind the scenes that amazed me was, and I think it's just before that Benedict Cumberbatch scene,
Yeah.
where he's running and one of the extras takes him out, and he does
Oh
that
yeah.
roll and he gets up, and
I
I
think
heard
it was
after
two
the
or
fact,
three times. No, it
yeah,
wasn't
oh yeah,
planned.
but it wasn't planned. It was
No,
just,
no, no,
and I mean, it was amazed to me that nobody stopped. That it just,
no. They
everybody
just
kept on
kept
going,
going.
and you've got what, two grips running with it on a pole or something like that. I think at
Well,
the
that
time,
no, that was it was taken out of the trench on
or maybe it was on a
it
on a train at that
It
point.
was suspended on a short scaffold pole,
Yeah,
and then it was literally lifted
onto the
onto the
the
technocrane.
techno crane.
So
That's
they
what it
just
was. Yeah,
had a couple of hooks, and they just
yeah,
hooked it
but
on.
it's seamless. I
Oh
mean,
no, it's incredible. It's
the
just
amount
incredible.
of prep that must have gone into that, and just over and over and over till
Yeah.
they got it
Well,
seamless.
it's like Roger's forte, because he's so well. His planning is exceptional,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I think he's in a position where he can demand that as a DP.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
he's worked with the Coen brothers. He said like they do storyboards, and if there was 3 months before they do the shot, and if there was a neon light in the top right hand side of frame,
There has to be an end.
there'd be a light
Yeah,
on the top right hand side of frame when they shot it.
yeah. Well, like you said, also though, I think he's at that point where he can say, no,
Yeah,
this is what we're doing, and
yeah,
that so
yeah.
he has that ability, unlike
No,
a lot
but
of other
we'd
people.
rehearse scenes with the operator before the sets were with the cast, before the trenches were dug, so
Hmm.
they knew how long to dig the trenches.
Oh wow.
So the actor starts speaking here in 400 years time.
Oh, and
That
so then they
dialogue
built the
finishes.
trench to
So they
match that.
marked it all out
Wow.
with the tape and bollards, and they said, right, we'll build a trench here, and it's this long. So it was. I mean,
What a dream.
not to be repeated
That's
experience, really.
that's just incredible.
Yeah.
So you do both A and B camera from your
Yeah,
resume.
like I was saying before, yeah, I just wanted to be, I mean, an A camera
Yeah.
operator. Once after a few years, and I knew how the business ran, I just thought, I want to be able to do any shot that's thrown at me,
Yep.
and I'd like to be in the driving seat.
Hmm.
So that's what I aimed at. That was my aim.
But looking at your IMDb, there are things even recently where you've done B camera
Oh no,
gigs. Yeah.
I still do B camera.
Do you have a preference?
I prefer doing A
Yeah,
camera.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think B camera is a really essential part of modern filmmaking, and it's an interesting discipline because you've got to find a shot without compromising the A
yeah,
camera shot, and it's generally on longer lenses. Perhaps you might get a side angle with a dolly and track,
yeah,
but yeah, it's a very good discipline.
yeah.
To
So what do you because
But I prefer doing A camera.
yeah.
But
It's funny because I think I prefer doing a camera, but
yeah,
when I do B camera, I actually sort of like it because like
no,
everybody's sort of looking over
absolutely,
there and I get to go, oh, I can just find this little
Ex-
cool piece here.
exactly,
But
exactly.
you are a little more out of the there are times where you're sitting on the sidelines, just
Yeah,
doing your thing.
yeah.
But what do you expect from a B camera operator? So for people who are starting out and coming in a B camera for you, what do you want? What are you looking for from a B camera operator?
Well, I'm looking for somebody who's self-reliant. They can find a shot.
Hmm.
They're aware of what I'm doing, which is more straightforward these days because the monitoring systems are so
Sure.
good. Um, and work well with the team, and um,
Do you prefer if a B camera, let's say you've got a big A camera shot
yeah.
and they've got so far there's nothing for them to do and they've thought, oh, there's something over here. Is it better for them to come to you first, go to the DP first with an idea?
It all depends. I mean, I think it's just best to keep everybody informed. I don't think. I mean, obviously, you have to involve the DP.
Yeah.
I'd say perhaps come and whisper in my ear, and if there's a reason I think it's not a good idea, I'd tell them. But it's.
Just because
I
you
don't
might
think
have
I
more
don't. I
information.
think I'd always want somebody to talk.
Yeah.
I don't mind who they talk to. Really, I don't think
Gotcha.
there's a right way. It all depends what the what the DP's sensibilities are.
Hmm.
But it's essential they know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. What about rehearsals? What do you do during rehearsals? Are you thinking about how to cover it or are you just watching what's going
No,
on?
I'll think about how we should cover it, and then I'll offer my ideas to the director. I mean, it's an interesting dynamic between the operator, the director, and the DP because every job is different and
Yeah.
every day is different.
It's true. It
Some,
is
so,
every day is different. You're right. Yeah.
Sometimes the DP will be very, very involved and say, you know, shot starts here, the shot finishes here. I worked with Shelley Johnson
Oh, I love Shelley
on
Johnson.
Wolfman, and he's very well. He was then on that. He was very precise.
Uh-huh.
I was doing B camera on that and Steadicam, and he'd say to Des Whelan, the A camera operator, "Look, it's on this lens. We start here, and he,
That's specific.
look
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
where the mark is, and this is where the shot goes to the different positions."
Hmm.
Um, so Shelley, even with B camera, he would be the same. But you could offer shots up to Shelley, but that changes. Sometimes, I've worked with DPs quite often on jobs, and they'll change from job to job.
Yeah.
They'll want you. I mean, I think it's essential an operator can run the camera department on his own.
Hmm.
So if the director wants you to come up with the shots, that's what you've got to be able to
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
Um, so because of that, every day is different.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
And because you've been doing this for a while, I'm
Yeah,
sure you've gotten on movies where you may have more experience than the DP you're working for. You get
yeah,
hired by a younger DP.
yeah, yeah. No, that's happened quite a lot. Yeah.
How do you play that? Because obviously you're still working for them, right? But you want to bring your experience. You don't want to overwhelm someone.
No, I think you've got to be really open to new ideas and not come in with a set way to do things, and um, just because somebody hasn't had the experience you've had, you just still bring your ideas to the table, but
Yeah.
you have to listen. You can't be doctrinaire about your approach. So, I mean, I try and when I can, when there's a number of films around, I try and do lower budget films as well because I have to work in a different way. I have to be more efficient in what I do. Maybe have less shots, and
or maybe not have all the equipment you want,
not have
or
all the
whatever.
equipment. So
So you specifically try to do that.
I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
I try and do. Work with newer directors and newer DPs and on lower budget things because it keeps me fresh as well.
Yeah. Oh,
You know,
that's a great
you know.
thing to do.
If I have the opportunity,
Yeah. Well,
you
I mean,
know.
it depends on what comes
Yeah,
up, of course.
yeah,
What about a B camera operator who's going to make the jump to A camera?
yeah.
What do you think? What do you think the biggest difference between those is, and what are the skill set that they need to make sure they have before they're ready to jump?
Well, you've got have to have an intuitive, even in these days where the line doesn't matter. You've got to know about screen direction,
Yes. Yeah.
timing of a shot. What the best platform for the camera is, how you work with the director and the DP. You've got to be very, approachable. Um, know when to say things, know when not to say things.
That might even be more important, right? When not to.
Read the atmosphere in the
Yeah.
room.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you've almost got to do your job in not in secret, but not be a loud presence except when it's needed to concentrate.
Hmm.
You know, matters. Sometimes you have to stand your ground and say, "Look, I need a rehearsal."
Yeah. Which
You don't get them these days.
I was going to
Really.
say, and people are
They're,
like, you need a what? What's
yeah,
yeah?
or you need X, Y done. But it's in communication skills
Yeah.
within your own department. You've got to say what the shot is, where it starts, where it ends, where the travel is. And you've got, communicate that to the actors as well.
Yeah.
You know.
So because I wanted to ask you about that, it's a good segue. You've worked with, I mean, you're talking about Tom Cruise. You've worked
Yeah.
with some of the biggest actors out
Yeah.
there. When you go onto a show, how do you determine what the actor needs from you? Because everybody's different, right? And some don't even want to know you're there, and some.
No, well, it just changes every job.
Yeah.
I did a film called Last Christmas with John Schwartzman and Paul Feig directing, and
I love Paul Feig.
we had Amelia Clark on that, and I just do what I was saying. I'd say, where the shot finished, their mark was, where their mark was, and just communicate what we were doing. So, and I think it's really important to build up a relationship with the actor if they want one.
If they want one.
Some actors want more distance,
Sure.
but I always offer people a good morning, how you are, and try and chat with them.
And
make them feel part of the team. Introduce my crew.
It's funny.
things
It's funny
like
you
that,
say that because I've always told people that's so important because everybody thinks, well, like I'm coming into their show and it's like, well, but they may not know anybody and they're standing
No,
out
no,
here with
no.
the dolly grip and first
No.
they see and you and they want to know who people are
No,
for the most part.
in my
Sometimes
experience, they want to be recognised
Yeah.
as
as human beings.
not lauded.
Yeah.
They just want to have an ordinary relationship
Yeah.
with people.
So when a show starts and you do go up and go, hey,
Yeah.
I'm Peter and this
Yeah.
blah blah blah. Are you sort of reading their reaction to gauge,
yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah,
like right from the moment you say hello?
yeah.
Yeah.
Some actors are like they're method actors and they want their distance.
Yeah.
Some actors can be chatting to you and the next second they're doing this really emotional speech. So every time, I think that's the attraction of the business, that it's different.
There's no playbook.
There is no playbook. Like we said, every day is different. Every person's different. And sometimes you really need to back off and be very quiet and whisper your instructions. And,
And when you are working with someone who's method and they're not hitting a mark, but let's just say it's a mark that you can't. It's just nothing's going to work unless. How do you go to the director and the DP and say, what do you want to do? Or do
no,
you
I'll try. Initially, I'll try and engage with the actor.
Yeah.
I'll be very quiet and I'll whisper to them, and sometimes they'll say no. I was on a job the other week, and the actor said, "Oh no, I can't do that." And then he sort of walked away and came back and said, "All right, I'll do that." You can't take things on face value.
Yeah.
Somebody, an actor can be very emotional and snap at you.
Yeah.
But they're not really snapping at you. They're in the character. And
yep.
You know,
Well,
but you have to, I was what I was saying before about not fighting for your corner, but if you need them to be there for the shot, then you've got to express that. And 99% of the time, actors always respond, I think.
that's what I find. And I mean, not that you're going to say this, but the reality is the reason you need them to hit their mark is because you want what they're doing to be usable on the film.
Oh,
It's
no,
not, it's not for
absolutely.
your own personal things.
Absolutely.
It's funny you say about snapping because yeah, sometimes there's no question. It's like maybe they're in their character and they're
Oh,
in their
no.
moment, whatever. That's understandable.
Yeah.
I did an interview with
Yeah.
Tommy Shalami, who created The West Wing, and I've worked with him a
Okay.
ton, and he's a very good friend of mine. And he said something really interesting. And he said,
Yeah.
if you have an actor who is, who's being cruel and this and
Yeah.
that and the other, he said one thing could be they're in their character.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what there is. He said the other thing is they could be absolutely, and he said I've seen this. They could be absolutely petrified of what they have to do. They have to go to
Absolutely.
some emotional place, and they don't know if they
Absolutely.
can, and so they're actually petrified. And this is someone.
Yeah.
This is like a dog that you get from the pound who's snapping because they're
Yeah.
so nervous. And I had never really thought
Yeah.
about that. I mean, I'm fully aware that I think it's the hardest job on set, even though
Oh,
sometimes
yeah.
sometimes it's a little too precious, but
Mm.
I wouldn't want to do it.
No, they've got to conjure up emotions that can be very disturbing,
And
sometimes upsetting.
and not only that, but just bear themselves in front of people they've never met,
Yeah.
and that everybody in the world theoretically is
Yeah.
going to be able to see. So yeah, I've over the years I've put that in the bank and sort of whatever you need and however you need
And
to
if they can't hit their marks for whatever reason,
Yeah.
we've got to make it work. Maybe we've got to, adapt what we do. We can't be, I think, as an operator, you can't be locked physically
Yeah.
into what you're doing, the mechanics. If you need to change something, you just go ahead and change
you
it.
just make it work.
And sometimes the DP might be upset with you, but
9 times out of 10, nobody notices.
no, exactly. But you tell them, look, on this take, I had to do this because
Yeah.
they're aware.
There was one thing that I did that I won't say who it was, but
Yeah.
I had to do something. The first take it just didn't work, and the second and I said something, and the second take I realized, okay, there's no way that this person is ever going to, even though they had
Yeah.
said they were going to get there, it's just not happening,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to get into it. So I talked to the Dolly group and we adjusted and got it, and it was this wonderful, wonderful, monologue that this actor gave, and it was just, and we did a push in at the end, and it was wonderful.
Yeah.
And the DP came up and said, "You didn't see the window in the back." And I said, "Well, I know we had to come over a little bit." He goes, "But the window." And I felt, and I didn't say it, but I felt like going, "It's not about the window." Like, did you see what this guy just,
Yeah.
And I understand what he's saying
Oh,
at the
no,
same time. And
absolutely.
I apologized and I said, "You know what? I didn't check with you. I should have. I came over." And he said, "Oh, I didn't realize that. It's fine. Don't worry about it." But it was so funny because, I think we all zero in on our own
Oh,
pieces of this. And sometimes we lose the bigger picture.
And there was a funny story from Eyes Wide Shut. On the Steadicam, I had 3 lasers on the bottom of the rig. So you put a mark on the floor.
Yeah.
You'd always have marks with Stanley. It was nothing freeform.
Yeah.
So I'd trim the lasers. I'd get the grip. I'd hold the Steadicam
Oh,
above
my
the mark,
gosh.
and the grip would trim the lasers so that all 3 met. So I knew what, if I was in the ballpark, I'd have like 1 dot rather than 3 dots.
Yep.
And then at the start of the take, the grip would measure from the lens down to the floor.
Wow.
And at the end of the shot, so I'd be standing up, and where my arm was on the vest, I'd take that as
You just
a guide
find a physical
guide to the camera height. So I was more on the mark than any other film. And then I remember we were shooting on the back lot once with Tom, and Stanley said via the God mic, "Pete, you're not on your mark." And I'd look down and said, "Well, I am Stanley." And he said, "Pete, you're not on the mark." And I said, "Well, I am on the mark."
You're looking at the
And Tom
lasers.
Cruise looked at me and he said, "Pete, for God's sake, just move the fucking camera."
It's not about
I was on the mark, but
Yeah.
he wanted to change it.
That's exactly
and that
right.
just wasn't computing with me.
That's
And I
so
thought,
funny.
he just said that to me once. So in future, when I got that, I just
Yeah.
"Okay, Stanley, moving now." "Yes, that's the mark."
But like you said, you get focused on
I
things.
was so
Yeah.
I was so obsessed by being on the mark.
Absolutely. And I'm sure
Yeah.
if he had said, "Hey, just come up a little bit," you would have just gone, "Of course."
Yeah, exactly. But
you
for
get it.
whatever reason, Stanley didn't want to say that. But it was always,
That's
Tom,
hilarious.
Tom, just move the fucking camera.
Because he probably realized you're going to be around 2 hours talking about this. He just wants to go with this scene.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
are as you're getting into a scene or even during rehearsals, are you starting to think about the cut and what pieces you're going
Oh
to need?
yeah. I
And
mean, I think that's an essential.
yeah,
You've got to be. It's almost like you're an editor as
yeah,
well. You've got to think what the cuts are, how many shots you're going to do in the scene.
hmm
You know, how much coverage you'd like to have. So I think I always err on giving more coverage, and
yeah.
then it'll probably get trimmed down
We
with
don't need
time.
that. We don't need this.
We don't
Exactly.
need that.
And do you try to share that with the AD to see if you're sort of having the same?
Exactly.
Yeah,
I have that conversation with the AD, obviously the director, the DP,
yeah, yeah,
the grips as well, and say, look, try and think a few shots ahead. We're going to
yeah.
do this, and then, we're going to be on the crane over
We're
there.
gonna see
So
over
we can,
there and this.
yeah,
Yeah, so
or
everybody can
you
get
can
ahead of
start
it.
building the crane or whatever it is,
Yep,
getting the track down for the next shot.
yep.
I think that time pressure's definitely increased over the
And
years.
I think that's to the question I was asking before. I
Yeah,
think that's part of that B to A camera jump is you're thinking 4 shots ahead,
exactly.
and you're letting
Exactly.
the ACs know like we got two in this direction, and then just so you know, we're going to be turning around and seeing
Yeah,
all the carts. So if
yeah,
you want to start,
yeah,
moving them over there,
yeah.
but
But I'll always try and do a little plan.
uh-huh,
I'll do like a plan view of the scene, and I'll
where you're going to be seeing,
where we're going to be, and then I'll
yeah.
hand that over to the AD or the director and see if
Oh,
we,
that's great.
so we all
So
agree.
you're saying you actually draw something out for them?
I draw something. Yeah, I'll
Oh,
draw.
I wish I
A
had that
plan
skill.
view of something. Yeah, you know.
I would, but they'd go, I don't understand what this means. I'd be
Well, that's
terrible at
where
it.
I guess
But
my
yeah, yeah, that's right. You're
yeah.
art.
But I mean, it'll be very simple. But
Yeah,
then
yeah.
I'll list what the shots are, and you know,
Yeah, my version is usually I'll just say we're going to see from, the curtain to the wall, and then we're
yeah,
going to turn around and see that and there.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, that's a really important thing to do as well.
yeah, yeah.
Just saying, telling people what you're
Well,
seeing.
I think it's just good to get everybody on the same page, right?
Exactly.
Because everybody's got, like we said, everybody's got their own little area that they're looking
Exactly.
at, and then if everybody's on top of that, then
Yeah. I mean, there's no point dressing the art department dressing something that's not in shot.
yeah.
Maybe if it's for a shot in a few shots time.
Yep, yep.
You
And
know.
also, like, the grip department, just letting them know we're going to be seeing there. So when they bring the track in for 3 shots down, they don't put it over there because
No,
that's going to be the next
exactly.
shot, and they know it's over there or
Exactly.
whatever. But how about working with the dolly grip? If you've worked with, obviously, when you work with your person who you've worked with forever, there's one thing. But what about you come in? It's a brand new dolly grip. How do you start that sort of finding out if they know what they know and them?
Well, I think it becomes pretty apparent very quickly how
Yeah,
much what their abilities are like. But um, it's an essential cooperation between the operator and the grip. But I what was the question again? Sorry.
just working with the dolly grip. I mean, I think it's one of those things that look on the things that you're working on
Yeah.
as an A camera operator. You're
Yeah.
probably either with your own person or you're
Yeah.
getting someone who's but really more probably for B camera operators. Sometimes you'll get someone who's moving up or who
Yeah.
not as experienced. And I'm just wondering, how do you work with them do you
Well, I think you've
explain
got
the
to.
shot completely through? Do you talk it through? Do you?
Well, you talk about where the shot's starting, finishing, what you're trying to do.
Yeah,
Whether your profile to somebody, 3/4 to somebody, and if it's apparent that somebody's you know struggling with some skill point, you've got to simplify the shot in some way.
I like that. Yeah,
Perhaps you don't have the boom down.
yeah.
You know.
You sort of pull it out of because I think that's more what I was trying to ask
Yeah.
for is because sometimes you will end up with someone like on a day call or something like that who maybe does not have the
No.
abilities that you wish that they had.
I mean, I did a job abroad somewhere. I won't say where, but the grips English was very, very basic, and we started to say, look, you're tracking on this line, and in the end, it was never going to work. So we
Yeah.
just had to do more general coverage. Perhaps the coverage suffered, but he was not going to be replaced.
Yeah.
He was a lovely guy, great grip,
This is
but
what.
just
Eh,
the language,
do you go over to the DP at that point and go, I just want to let you know?
Oh no,
I'm
absolutely.
gonna
In that
have to.
specific case, I went to the DP and told him, and he said, "Okay,
Yeah,
no
yeah.
problem."
And most people
And he
understand.
was, he was very flexible as well. But
Yeah. What are you going to do?
What do? Do you want to get no coverage or some coverage?
Yeah.
So we just like do general moves, and
Yeah.
I'd say go, stop. Obviously help him as much as I could, but it was, we worked out quite an intricate shot with moves on specific lines, and it was not going to work.
Yeah, I was just
So
talking
then
to
you can perhaps go to Steadicam, but in that case we didn't have time.
there is that case, which is frustrating when you're doing a Steadicam shot
Yeah.
that shouldn't be, but it's just
No.
because it's going to be faster and
Yeah.
you're not going to have to. I was just talking to Gary Spratling,
Oh,
who
great.
I'd never met before,
Yeah.
wonderful guy, but
Yeah.
he was telling me
He's a great raconteur.
I think he was
Gary.
telling me about it might have been one of the Rambo movies in Thailand,
Yeah.
and he got out there and it was the first shot, and it was a big dolly shot, and he was explaining to the dolly grip, it was, and then as they did the first take, he realized the guy did not understand anywhere near the English that he thought he did.
No.
And he said, okay, and so he started tapping him and this and that and the
Yeah.
other. But that's what you do, right?
No, you've got to use any means
Yeah.
necessary.
Because at the end of the day, people want to do the work. It's just not, they may not have the abilities, or they may, like you said, there may be a language barrier or something.
I think
like that.
the call to it was all is being able to change, adapt to what you're doing. If there's
Yeah.
no point flogging a dead horse if something is not going to
That's
work.
exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. You've just got
And
to.
you know what I've found a couple times I've done with people who it's a language barrier is I'll just take out my phone and I'll sort of literally walk the speed and
Exactly.
so because it is a visual medium, so hopefully if that's the only problem, then they get that pretty quickly.
I mean that the Artemis system has just been a revelation.
It's amazing, right?
Because I use my iPad as a finder now.
That's
I very
exactly what I
very
do.
rarely
Yeah.
use an optical finder. I mean, people, the director, whoever, DP, are looking over your shoulder.
That's
You
and
can
you
change
can
the
record
lens.
it. You can snap a
Exactly.
The reason that I
It's
like it
big.
is I'm 6'4", right? So
Yeah.
sometimes I'll be holding an eyepiece and then I hand it to a director who's 5 feet and they'll look at
Yeah.
it and I go, you know what? You're not looking
No,
at the
no,
same
no.
thing I am.
But it ensures you're all looking at the same thing.
It's exactly right. Or the
Yeah.
other thing is you're getting it right down to the ground. You can take a
Exactly.
still, then bring it up so everybody can look at it.
Exactly.
So the only thing that I don't know if you found this is there's something about. And I think it has to do with the fact that there's not a ground glass or something. I haven't quite figured out the physics of it, but the lenses are not exactly like the film plane is not where the film plane is. So
No.
like setting dolly track, I was given an extra foot or something.
No, it's like 90% there, but
Yeah.
not if you want something.
You got to get
You got to get
an
an
actual
optical
lens
finder,
if you're on there. But it's different. It's different.
Yeah, the field of view is not
Yeah.
exactly the same. It can be different top to bottom as well.
Is there a project that you've done that you are proud of that has not gotten that you think I don't understand why nobody saw this or like
I've worked on a few films that have never been seen. But
we all have
some
of them for good
Shape,
reasons.
Hippie Shape was a great film we did, but it didn't.
That was early on in your career, right? That's at the very
that
beginning.
was out. That was going to be released at this by working title the same time as The Boat That Rocked, but I think they had a rough time financially with The Boat That Rocked, and they thought Hippie Shake wouldn't do any better, so they didn't release it.
Oh,
It
okay.
was a pity because we did a lot of great Steadicam on that on that film. But no, I mean I think Red, White, and Royal Blue could have had a bit more.
Yeah, I saw that on your IMDb. I'd never even heard of that before.
It's
I'm
not
gonna
a
check
bad
that out.
film.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
It's amazing how many great films are out there that
Yeah,
just
but
don't get the-
mind you, it was only for Amazon. It wasn't for film release.
Yeah. Have you had a show where either you've
I think Kundun actually, I think doesn't get looked at.
You're right,
enough
actually, it doesn't
because it's not a traditional. It's not a gangster film.
No,
and it's a beautiful film.
it is absolutely.
It's quite mesmeric, and it was certainly one of the most interesting experiences I've had in my career because Tibetans came from all over the world to work on that film, and it was really emotional. So we shot 90% of it in Ouarzazate in Morocco, and every weekend the Tibetans would lay on some entertainment. They cook for us at weekends.
Oh, how wonderful!
They were just beautiful people. I mean, I remember we did one scene where we reenacted the moment that the people in Lhasa found out that the Dalai Lama had escaped, and there were some people who were actually in the room when it happened in 1959.
Really? Wow.
And they just broke down in tears like they did in 1959.
Just because it reminded them so much of... wow.
And the crew were weeping as well. It was just impossible to watch.
What an amazing experience.
Yeah, it was. I mean, they were just fantastic people.
Yeah. Oh, that's wild.
And I
That's one of
remember,
the cool things about this industry is you get access to things that other
oh yeah,
people
I mean,
would never
especially
have
with that
access to.
project because it
Yeah.
was, it was a real passion project. And I remember as well, some of the actors ended up in a fight with two guys from the Chinese embassy. We were filming in Casablanca, and the Chinese embassy sent some guys down to take a look.
Oh, really?
And one of the actors saw them and knew they were from the embassy. And there was
Oh,
like,
so they were incognito, but someone realized who
oh
they
yeah, and
were.
there was a fist fight. Yeah,
Really? Wow.
one of the Tibetans.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah.
Have you ever had a situation where you just had a shot where you completely failed at, or even you got fired off of a show? I'm just wondering if that ever happened to you, and if how do you deal mentally with those
I
things?
didn't get on well with Michael Bay.
You're not the only
I
person
did
in the
one of the
world.
Transformers, and like two
Okay.
days in, I said to the DP Ben, I said, Ben, I'm going to get fired.
You could just sense it.
I just knew,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, yeah, it was just obvious that.
Yeah. And is that what ended up happening, or
Oh
did you
yeah,
leave?
after
Yeah.
6 weeks I was released, but it
But
was the best thing
but I was gonna say
that could
that
happen.
that sounds like maybe that's something you were fine with.
Oh no,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wasn't upset.
But
No, no offense.
have you had a situation where you couldn't pull off a shot or something like that, and just it's because I think at some point on some level that happens to everybody. I'm just wondering how you mentally.
I'm sure it's happened, but I can't
Yeah. Well, clearly it didn't affect you.
I can't
Yeah.
remember any.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, it's awful if something like that happens. You want to
You don't want to drop the ball,
you don't
right?
want to drop the ball, and you
Yeah.
beat yourself up for days. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, it has happened. I can't remember a
Well, you
specific
don't have to go into specifics, but what is
specific.
so?
I do remember something actually. It was a technical failure. It wasn't. In this case, it wasn't my fault. The I was doing a shot on a film called Resurrected,
Huh?
and the Steadicam basically broke.
Oh,
It was with a BL4 in low mode,
oh my God.
and it pulled
That's a heavy
the
camera.
plug. It just basically pulled the camera out of the end of the Steadicam
Oh, geez.
pole.
And fell to the ground, you mean?
Fell to the
Oh,
ground, and that was the end of that shot.
but even so,
And I
as
didn't get asked back, but it wasn't my fault.
well,
You
but
know,
even so, as the Steadicam operator, I'm sure you
BL4, a
feel
monster of a camera.
oh,
Yeah,
it was a huge camera.
yeah.
But so, but mentally, how do you just? I mean, what do you do to try to not let that get to you? And especially my
Well, I
big
think it does get to you, but you know, certainly if I've done a shot that I haven't quite felt I've nailed, and they've moved on,
yeah
you can't. Experience has taught me not to be precious.
yeah
Although I'm meticulous about what I do, and I want to succeed, sometimes
you gotta let go, right?
yeah, but you've
Yeah
just got to let it go. You can't let that affect you because
yeah
you're not going to be able to do the next shot if you're worried about that. You
uh,
have to move on.
yeah yeah.
You know.
That's sort of what I was wondering. So
Yeah.
basically, you just put it in a box, and maybe on the drive home, you
Yeah,
beat
yeah,
yourself up about it or
exactly. Yeah,
whatever.
but if it's happening on every single shot you're doing on a film, then something's very wrong.
Yeah. Well,
But
clearly, if they're
that
moving
hasn't
on,
happened yet.
yeah.
Time to
Well,
retire
and
when that
I don't know about
happens.
you, but I mean, personally, every shot I do,
Yeah.
I'm always thinking of as soon as we cut, I'm always thinking of some way I could make it better, and I may
No,
not need to,
absolutely,
but
absolutely.
so I think that's part of the game is you just go, it's never going
Yeah.
to be as good as it can be.
No, no,
So
no. You have to self-analyze as well
yeah,
and put things in perspective. But I'm always very critical
yeah,
about what I do and personally.
yeah. I think anybody who's
Yeah,
good at what they do is
yeah,
because you're always trying to be better,
yeah.
and
There's no point being complacent.
yeah, and it's funny. I asked you earlier about being nervous, and I sort of think that if you're not nervous, like everybody should be a little nervous
Oh no,
because otherwise you think, well, I can do anything and this and that and
no,
the other,
no,
you know.
no.
I mean, it's a personality trait, and that's another issue.
Yeah,
But I think being nervous means that you're always trying to do a better job.
yeah. No, you've always got to keep your eyes out there for things that
Yeah,
could change.
yeah,
Things that on the edge of frame that might be coming in or whatever, and you know,
absolutely.
difference in coverage or.
Well, this has been amazing. You've had an incredible career, and thank you for sharing all this. I really appreciate it. It's been just a blast sitting and talking with you.
Oh, yeah.
But I'll leave you with a question I leave everybody, which is advice for someone getting into the business today on how to succeed, or maybe what you wish you knew back then that you've learned since.
I think the first thing is see as many films as you can. I mean, I remember when I was a student, there was a huge late night scene in London in the late 70s and early 80s, and I saw so many films, really way out there films like Louis Buñuel films and surrealist films and, things like El Topo. I mean, amazing films that probably wouldn't get financed today. So I think it's really important to study, look at as many films as you can because you pick up so much from that, and keep fit. Learn Steadicam if you've got the ability. I think Steadicam is an essential tool, even to this day. There was a few years back when the gimbal heads came out, there was a bit of a lull in the usage of Steadicam, but because a Steadicam is so responsive, I think it's an essential tool, and learn to use the wheels. But I think watching as many films as you can, learn how to communicate with people. That's a really important skill. Telling people what's going on in your head and think ahead. But if you want to be an operator, I think Steadicam and keeping fit, looking at different styles of films is essential. Watch as much as you can.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We'll be back soon with another great episode. Don't forget to check us out on theop.io for all sorts of information on operating and storytelling. So thanks for listening and have a great day.